Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the decision by the United States to kill the Keystone XL pipeline project from Canada. Let's get back to our distinguished panel. And Patrick, I'm going to give you a chance to answer that question that David posed. What about a warming world, pollution, survival of the Earth?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way the question and the premise of the question is almost that the people in Canada that work for TransCanada don't have a conscience and wouldn't be affected by climate change, and that their greed somehow surpasses some sort of moral obligation in their brain. I let you finish. The pipeline itself would reduce CO2 emissions. Multiple State Department reports said that. And so if we want to say, hey, the rest of the world, we know you're going to use these resources. We know you're going to use coal and oil. Here's a more efficient way to get it to market that will lower carbon emissions. As far as the impact of climate change, that 97% statistic that keeps getting thrown around about scientists has been routinely debunked, because it looks at abstracts of studies and leaves out, it wouldn't stand the test of a statistical 101 term paper.
I thought you were a markets guy, not a climate denier.
Let me finish. If you look at the climate right now, climate has always changed. I mean, right now the climate is cooler than it was during the medieval period. We have a precipitous drop in hurricane activity. It's less than 80% drop over one of the highest years on record. And so I pose the challenge of what is worse for humanity, grinding poverty or liberating people through cheap energy resources so that they can then transition, as we are trying to do, into a cleaner market economy.
David?
That is so obviously not the question. Bernard DeVoto in the 1950s said, all mining exhausts the deposit. You're defending a fossil fuel company. Bill McKibben, who was a classmate of mine many years ago, I was a lowly political cartoonist and he was the editor, led an effort of divestment in apartheid. He wants to lead a divestment in fossil fuels right now. Comparable things. We have to think of alternative ways to fuel this world, or it's going to burn up. All your facts, this is the hottest year on record. The year before, the next hottest.
All right.
It's obvious.
All right. I want to move on, Philippe. President Obama made this announcement, of course, ahead of this very important climate change conference coming up in Paris. As our reporter pointed out, it does give the president the moral high ground, doesn't it, to enter into this conference and say, look, the United States has made a major decision for climate change. It's leading the way. So he goes in with good credentials. What do you think is going to come out of this conference?
Well, I hope we'll see a mind shift. I think Copenhagen was very disappointing. The Doha conference helped pave the way. Peru, got the people back together. And I think the scene is set now. China is also trying to do something. For them, it's maybe more of a problem of air pollution, actually, than it is of climate change per se. But they know they have to change their ways, too. So, hopefully, especially because, the approach taken by the French government has been to entice people to come up with their own commitments, they will be more able to, agree to what they can put on the table rather than an overall plan. So I'm pretty hopeful. That being said, if you've looked at the statistics, that will leave us with plus 3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, which is beyond the range of the 2 degrees Celsius that scientific consider as more safe.
Right, Jason, let me ask you this. The president
Sure.
has made this decision. He will reject the project.
Yeah.
But in reality, what effect will this decision have on reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
The reason that climate activists have opposed the Keystone XL pipeline from the beginning is that there is no credible scenario in which we avert dangerous climate change and extract tar sands oil. It's impossible. James Hansen, NASA climatologist, said that extracting tar sands oil would be game over for the climate. He said that Keystone XL is a fuse to one of the largest carbon bombs on the planet. President Obama realizes this. Hillary Clinton realizes this. Climate denial is not a credible political platform. It's 2015, y'all. We got to get with the picture.
Well,
that is what the president is going to Paris with. He said, this is real, this is important, and we have to keep some carbon in the ground if we're serious about fighting climate change.
Well, it's also not a credible platform, and maybe to give you a little bit of advice, and the president as well, going into Paris, it's not a credible platform to go into a negotiation with symbolic victories and political moves. If the president had recognized that, hey, allowing pipelines and free commerce actually cleans the environment and we can actually lower carbon carbon emissions. That shows a much more serious person than somebody that's willing to kowtow to the wishes of special interests. I think the president looks weak, and this puts him in a worse position for negotiating a strong deal.
From our perspective, the litmus test of climate action for any global leader is, are you willing to say no to projects like Keystone? Are you willing to keep fossil fuels in the ground?
I want to get to that in a moment, but Philippe wants to say something. Go ahead.
No, coming back on this idea that there is less emissions coming from pipeline, yes, per se, but in the current context of prices and in the absence of alternative pipelines, not having the Keystone XL is having an impact on the medium term over decision makings over the increase of exploitation of the tar sands. So it is more than a symbolic thing, at least in the current context.
But Jason, politically, this was also the best time for the president to take this decision. I mean, look at the factors that all lined up in his favor. The oil price is low. Keystone will not affect employment. Employment is going down in this country. Employment figures just came out. It's now at 5%. Canada has a new government, a Liberal government, which didn't make too much of a noise about the fact that he made this decision. And the president's not running for office anymore.
It's definitely a great political move by the president. But you may also notice that many of the candidates running for to succeed President Obama are also against the pipeline. The politics have fundamentally shifted on this. Years ago, 94% of insiders said this was a done deal. This pipeline's going to be built. You had a lot of Democrats in Congress who supported it. That's changed fundamentally. Now, if you are a Democrat running for office in the United States, you have to believe in climate change, and you have to be ready to walk the walk. You have to be ready to say no to some of these projects.
David, there is a group that lobbies for the fossil fuel industry, the Consumer Energy Alliance, and it says that
I think somebody's on this show who does that, right?
Well, there's another group I'm talking about now. It says President Obama has thumbed his nose, those were their words, at the 2/3 of Americans who support reducing energy imports from unfriendly nations. Do they have a point?
Well, I would say that Patrick mentioned that symbolic victories don't mean anything, or riding a symbol don't. But I've watched in my lifetime symbolic victories that begin with race, with gender, with sexuality. I've watched huge shifts. And I'll go back to saying I was irritated at first when I read the headlines and it said a big victory for Greens, because I'm, of course, thinking a big victory for human beings. But if it starts with a victory for Greens, I think going in there with momentum and causing, I mean, this is the kind of shift. I traveled up the coast after Hurricane Sandy and followed the devastation. While that was going on, the gay marriage debate was totally shifting under our feet. And I was with a geologist named Orrin Pilkey, and we took hope in that other shift, in our own shift, and hoping that, that people would start to recognize climate as a true emergency, which it is. I mean, I'm not trying to be, I feel a little embarrassed that I got so wrought up earlier. I didn't know I would, but I just feel like it makes sense when your home is being attacked to defend yourself. It's an emergency. We're in the midst of it, and we've got to respond. And it's encouraging for me that we did some responding on Friday.
Okay, I want to go quickly to Philippe. Philippe, this decision by President Obama, is this the final death blow for Keystone, or are there any other conditions under which it could come back, perhaps under a new president?
There are two conditions. I mean, the first one is, the November election next year, if it's in November indeed. If the Republicans wins, definitely TransCanada will go back to it. If the price go back up, then there'll be a reconsideration possibly. If the situation in Venezuela gets nasty, and if Mexico is providing some issues with the export, then there will be a lot of noise coming from the refineries, down south on the Gulf Coast.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Philippe Le Billon, Patrick Hedger, David Gessner, and Jason Kowalski. Thanks to all of you for joining us.